I met Kathy Westlock when I was in my Cybersix cosplay, and people go nuts
Oh,
for that
wow.
cosplay, honestly. But I was so scared to meet her in it. So I'm
Oh,
like
wow.
jumping up there on the stage to get my photo because it's like $10 a photo, whatever. I'm like, here you go, here's my money, please. It's just really cool, whatever. And she's just like, oh, she's speaking in like the Cybersix voice to me, and she's like, a promise is a promise. And I'm just like, oh. And then I hop up there and I spill her coffee into her purse.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
And I was just like, oh my God, I hate myself and want to die. But no, she was really nice about it. Yeah.
Hey everyone, welcome to Zannen, Canada. I'm your host, Jesse Betteridge. This is a podcast focusing on the many connections between anime and Canadian media. And in this episode, we're doing another retrospective on a show that has had a very important impact, Cybersix. Joining me are quite possibly two of the most qualified people possible to talk about this wonderful show. First off, we have Z, the noted Cybersix cosplayer and CanCon otaku. Z, can you just tell the folks a little about yourself and then what you've contributed to society?
Sure. Okay, so one of my first cosplays that I ever did that like gained a bit of notoriety around, possibly because I didn't stop wearing it, possibly because it was okay, was the Cybersix cosplay. And I've actually done Adrian now too. I've gone back and done that. And people thought that was Harry Potter, and I was very upset about that. But that's
where did people think it was Harry Potter?
That was at YetiCon, so it's a bunch of normies walking around at the same time, and they're just like, "Oh, Avada Kedavra." I'm like, "No, I'm not. No, sorry, wrong guy, wrong coat, wrong hair, right glasses. That's about it."
Yeah, brutal.
Yeah, that was really sad. But yeah, I cosplayed Cybersix for probably 2 years, back when Cybersix was not Cybersix, back when cosplay was like not really a TikTok, like one and done sort of deal kind of thing. So people know me, or they knew me as the Cybersix cosplayer and also the Nanoland cosplayer. And I've done a lot of weird Canadian media. I'm sorry, Brady. Are you Canadian? I can't remember.
I am not, but I feel like I am in my heart sometimes because I love so much like Canadian media and work on restoring so many like anime dubs from like Canada. So
I've done a lot of like weird PSA based cosplays. So like the "Don't You Put It in Your Mouth" puppets. Like I cosplayed the No Frills slogan one Halloween. It was like a costume for Halloween was like the name of it. I've done the Telefrancais pineapple. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, people think that I'm a CanCon otaku, but
Yeah.
anybody who thinks that has clearly never met or even heard of you. Yeah, like no contest.
Yeah, I used to do the Canadian nostalgia panel. That was a staple at Con Bravo for a few years running. That was always a packed house. It was always a lot of fun to just like make people go, "Oh God, why? Why did we come up with that as a society?" And I'm like, I don't know, because we have no budget, and we're not American. I guess that's our our two goals of being Canadian. Yeah, so that's me.
You also have the frantic fanfic.
Oh, yes. Okay. So during the pandemic, I couldn't go out and see any friends, and I kind of went a little insane a little bit. So we started doing like PowerPoint presentations online, and it just like evolved into writing fan fiction at the same time with everybody else, and then swapping it off, and then continuing it that way. And we wrote some of the most horrific stuff that I've ever cried tears laughing at. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, my boyfriend's a software developer, and I'm an artist. And we've always wanted to collaborate on doing something together that ties those things together. So we made it into a real video game, and you can play it right now on the internet. It's franticfanfic.com. Free to play. There's a $5 membership if people want to kick us money so that they stop seeing ads. And, you know, it's taken off, and lots of people have played it, and they've also cried laughing at the horrible things that their friends have come up with, and they're just like, how are we friends?
Oh,
I'm
that's
like,
so
I don't
cool.
know, those are your friends. yeah, it's really rewarding to do something like that. That's not just me going out and like making other people's IP like a thing. I guess it is because it's about fan fiction, but it can be like about like something on your desk. I don't know, but it's nice to make something yourself, right?
Is it like a crowdsourced alternative to Chat GDP?
No, actually, you can't read anything unless
Okay.
people like post it to websites and stuff. It's all private
Okay.
games,
I see.
so it's more like Jackbox, but
Oh, okay.
and like the actual playing of it, it takes like 3, 4, 10 minutes to actually write the stuff, but then when you do start reading it, it's just like tears of laughter, like what have we done? It's a much more of a payoff in the reading part, not so much in the writing part, but some people like writing and reading, you know.
It sounds like a lot of fun. And you probably noticed there is someone else here as well, Brady Hartel. Brady, could you introduce yourself to everyone?
Hi, I'm Brady Hartel. I do a lot of things. For my day job, I work as on video games. I'm a game developer. I primarily do like graphic design and art production and stuff. Well, the longest running game is this game called Skullgirls, which is a 2D fighting game, which I've worked on probably for like the last 10 years, which is kind of funny because it coincides with my other job that I've been doing for also 10 years, and that is as a producer for Discotek Media, where I work on, back then I worked on DVDs, but now I work on Blu-rays. I started as a packaging designer and then moved into production, and so I sort of do a lot of different things. And one of the projects that I had was the subject of this podcast, which is Cybersix, which was my first thing that I produced for Discotek Media, from restoring the footage to 24 frames per second progressive, to hunting down all the extras, producing all of the commentaries, finding the pilot, like all the stuff on the DVD. If you ever bought the Cybersix DVD, that was me like being a kid in a candy store thinking, I can do whatever I want with this. So let's see what I can do. And then we ended up getting like Kathy to do a commentary and a bunch of different things, which is really cool of her to do. So yeah, and the thing is, like, Cybersix was a show that I had seen on here in America on Fox Kids, and it never finished. But I always had like a affinity for it. I thought it was really cool and neat. So when I was told like, oh, this is one of the shows that was available to me, I got it, and I was like, can you send me the episodes? The owner of Discotek was like, sure, here. And I was like, oh man, like I could totally like restore these. And so I got him to send, like, I was just like, hey, send me the masters. And so I got him to do that. And that's sort of how I went on my like rabbit hole of like restoring Cybersix. So I thought it was such a cool show. Like, just one of the like neatest things I'd ever seen.
I guess there was kind of a question of whether or not Cybersix qualifies as anime, and I don't want to delve into that too much. I think it does, because every visual aspect from the ground up for that show was done in Japan. And even if it doesn't have a traditional anime style, it is, it has all the hallmarks of an anime production, something made in that pipeline, including Yashimoto's design that was done in Japan too.
Yeah,
interestingly.
Yeah, I was actually, I in the commentary I pointed that out. I was like, this is a very like horrific caricature, especially by these days. But it was created by like, if Japan wanted to edit him, and I mean, compared to the original comic, they did edit him. But like, they could have went further. Like, they could have changed him completely, which is such a weird thing.
It's a weird choice. I think it might be in large part just of how like slavishly faithful they are to the art style of the original comic. But I mean, even they made other changes, and yet he's almost entirely preserved.
Yeah, there's interest. It's interesting too. Like, I would consider it anime. It's a very interesting thing because it was all written and recorded in Canada, and like all the writers are Canadian, or at least like most of them were. I mean, notably, the lead writer was Terry Klassen, who people probably know as like Krillin from Dragon Ball Z, or like the ton of different things. He's got a very unique voice, but he was like the head writer, and like
Yeah, if you look him up on Anime News Network and look at all the credits he has for Dragon Ball Z alone, it is laughably massive.
Yeah, I mean,
he
and I
did
don't.
so many voices in that for the multiple dubs.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to pigeonhole him in that either because he's done a ton of voice work and he's just got this really unique voice. And also, he's a director and has worked on things like My Little Pony and all that. But
yeah, I mean, that's just a small portion of just what he's contributed to so many different shows. Over the years.
For sure.
His actual reputation like vastly overshadows that.
Yeah,
the work on that one show on Dragon Ball Z. So.
But yeah, like, and it's very crazy because it's like that portion of it is all done in Canada, whereas the animation was this whole Japanese team. I know behind the scenes there was like this language barrier struggle, right, of trying to bring the scripts to life how the team wanted it, but also whereas the Japanese team wanted a completely different way, and there was sort of like a struggle there, especially because again of like the language barrier. But there's also some of the DNA in the animation too, that it's very much like the a lot of the people who worked on this are sort of the people who also worked on a lot of like the super well animated Batman the Animated Series episodes that TMS did, right? Mm-hmm. So like, or the animator who did the super laser sequence in Batman Beyond Return of the Joker, who had previously done the similar sequence on Akira, like, so they had sort of that DNA, and it was kind of like when Hervé Bedard, he's the guy who went to the Carloses who created the original comic and bought the rights to it, and then took it around, and then took it to TMS, and TMS seemed to want to make their own like action adventure, dark action adventure show for like international audiences, because they had done Batman and they had done stuff in the DC stuff, so like they kind of wanted to try and do that, and using that at the time they used an animation tool called Celsius, which was one of the earliest like digital animation systems, and it still exists. Celsius became this program called Clip Studio Paint.
I have that.
yeah. Clip Studio Paint, or it used to be called, what is it, Manga Studio is also what it was called before.
Yeah.
That's the same, like, it's I don't know if it's like the same tool, but it's the same company, and it has a lot of the same stuff in it. So like that tool is sort of has roots in what was used for these digital cartoons at the time. And so they were working on this whole digital pipeline, and so Cybersix was kind of like a litmus test for that pipeline as well, which was also used in, again, like Batman Beyond Return of the Joker, which is HD and one of the like a completely digital production as well. That in fact they had to convince Bruce Timm's team and all that, if you listen to the commentaries for that movie, to use the system. And I'm not sure if they should, like, I can't remember which came first, but I do wonder if like one or the other was kind of like feeding into each other, because they have very similar looks to them in terms of being like dark and having like dark backgrounds and stuff. Though I do think for Cybersix, I'm pretty sure the backgrounds are all painted and scanned in, whereas the characters are all like digital. But yeah, like it's that sort of crazy confluence of North American meets Japan, and so like yeah, I would totally consider it an anime, even if it's got like a co-production sort of feel to it.
Oh yeah, like I tried to have a panel on Cybersix at Anime North, and they refused it because it wasn't anime enough. This was like 5 or 8 years ago or something, and I had to argue with the panel director that it was anime, and I was like, you know what? I'm okay here. If they don't want me to run this panel on Cybersix, that's fine. And then I just kind of like and then done here. Bye-bye. I don't want to convince you guys that it's anime. It's obviously anime. Like, it's animated in Japan. And they're like, oh, but if it's animated in Japan, you've got all these other things that are animated in Japan, like Spider-Man. The 90s Spider-Man was the same studio, right? And I'm just like, I don't want to have this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a valid debate to a degree. First of all, I got to say that usually I'd be very supportive of an anime convention actually trying to focus their panels on anime and not things that aren't anime, which is big problem I find with some of the cons I go to is that they just
Mhm.
let the non-anime content out of control. Cybersix is, I think there's an interesting debate to be had over that one because it's so unique in many ways. I would say there is nothing quite like Cybersix.
Right.
I'm even when I think of other co-productions, this was the first animated co-production ever made between Canada and Japan. There were others later, but nothing came together quite the way that Cybersix did, and that's because the Canadian company that was behind it, NOA, Network of Animation, they had, which was run by Hervé Bedard, as Brady mentioned, had just a very unique approach to putting things together when they collaborated with TMS, specifically Telecom Animation in Japan. And it was made for an international market, but it first showed up on Teletoon in September of 1999. And man, they blew through those episodes lightning fast. They didn't air it once a week. They aired it irregularly, about 2 episodes a week. Z, I'm not sure if you caught that initial airing on
I was
Teletoon.
9 at the time, so memory foggy. But I knew I loved it. As soon as I saw it, I was like, oh my God, what is this? Like my little 9-year-old brain was on fire.
Yeah, they blew through it in about 2 months. And they kept running it over and over again. And then they took it off for a while. Then they brought it back in the early 2000s, around 2003, 2004.
Mhm.
And they ran that show a lot. If
Nonstop.
you were a kid watching Teletoon at that time, and many of us were,
Yeah.
it certainly was ingrained into your brain to some degree.
Yeah.
Probably many sexual awakenings as well from that show. I have no doubt at all. And it made an impression in Canada like it did nowhere else in the world. And as Brady mentioned, it also ran on Fox Kids in 2000. Not quite a bit of a contrast for the way that played out.
It's really sad.
It is very sad. And also, the worst part is that 13 episodes were produced, and there were supposed to be a second set of 13 episodes. But those episodes being produced was contingent on the series being successful in the United States on Fox Kids.
Ooh.
And it was completely set up for failure. And it's just this sad situation where it ran again and again and again in Canada. I don't know how much you could argue it was a financial success for Teletoon and the Canadian partners, but it did not matter because 10 episodes that were basically set up to fail on Fox Kids did indeed fail. And that's why the show ended on a cliffhanger and will very likely never be resolved.
Yeah, I mean, the Fox Kids thing is also super interesting too because they aired 10, they skipped the Yashimoto Private Eye episode, and so we got up to episode 11, which was it's like the episode with the werewolf where it's pretty much Adrian's chased. It's got some of the best animation too, but we never, here in America, we never got the 2-part finale. I mean, it's more or less a cliffhanger, but it's enough at the end there that it would have at least been sort of a satisfying conclusion, but we never got that. So it's just just an episode where Adrian / Cybersix escapes from being chased, and then that's it. Then never again. And
they ran that next episode preview for Daylight Devil, but Daylight Devil never showed up.
Yeah, in fact, I when I was doing my research, there's a guy called Surstak who did these. I guess what he had a satellite, and I remember reading it because I was at the time, even as a teenager, I was really into Power Rangers, and so I would always read his spoiler warnings. Also, was into Digimon and all sorts of stuff. I've always been a giant nerd, so he would go through the satellite listing things, and he would say, "Well, here's all the next episodes," and I remember finding I was okay, so here's exactly what aired on what days, and I was huh. And so he noted in there that, that preview showed, and then they never showed the next episode. And I'm not sure I think they doubled up on Digimon because it was so much more popular at the time. Even in the shadow of Pokemon, Digimon was doing quite well. So they were just we'll just show more of this, better ratings. Kids want to watch this. When, they didn't really promote Cybersix super well. I think there was one commercial they showed, one or two commercials they showed on Fox Kids. They didn't really, and they didn't like air it a ton, I don't think. So it was one of those things where like it just didn't get the attention I feel like it deserved. And then there's also like that whole thing with the lawsuit as well, with Dark Angel and the similarities between it. And I don't know how much that truly affected it, but it's like Dark Angel was a show on Fox, and Cybersix was also going to air on Fox. Like, it's sort of like a weird situation that I personally don't know how that'll affect his stuff, but it's still, when you look at it, it still looks kind of like, like why, like, is this why? Like, you will really never know, but it's just something that, it's a weird thing that happened during the production of this show, which, yeah, it feels like a miracle that it got made in the first place, given the tone and the subject matter of it.
The lawsuit with Dark Angel, was that directed at the animated version, or was it directed at either the comic or the Argentinian live action drama, which we'll talk about a little later?
I can't remember exactly. I mean, I think it had to do with the Carloses who created it. Magilla and Trillo.
Okay, all right.
So the two guys who created it were both named Carlos, who have both unfortunately since passed away.
Both quite young too.
Yeah, which is sort of surprising, and I mean it's also sort of an oddball because it is like it's from Italy, like the comics from Italy, but was written and drawn in Argentina, where the Carloses were from.
Yeah, it was published in a magazine called Scorpio. Scorpio had an Argentinian edition and an Italian edition. It ran in both countries. But even though they were based in Argentina, it was primarily for the Italian one that it was running in. And it did run in the Argentinian one as well. But my understanding is that the Italian edition is the only one where the entire story was published. There was no other language where the whole thing actually was completed.
The version that's floating around online that most people have read is the French version, which
I had those.
Never completed. They never went through it all.
If you weren't aware, I am one of the people who started those scanlations.
Oh, that's cool.
That's why it's labeled Zannen. I worked with, well, I don't know if he wants to be identified, but it was Pep and Ragebot was the other guy. We put together the first 7. You know, I stand by some of the decisions I made in that translation, regardless. And other people have picked it up.
That's cool.
Yeah, I was looking into it just the other day. I hadn't been following it. It looks like about half of the comic has been translated into English.
Oh, that's cool.
People are, and there's a pretty. I mean, back when this show was airing, one of the things that always made me frustrated was how it was so confounding. I always thought I had missed an episode. There was just no information. So, and when you go online, you could read about these comics, but there was just like 2 websites that gave you very general, broad information and like a couple scans. Yeah. And that was it.
That website that's all black with like the Cybersix logo and that one.
Yeah. But
I mean,
compared to now, there's an entire wiki which extensively breaks down every part of this franchise. And there's a subreddit that's pretty active as well, and
that's awesome.
That's where the most of the work into translating the rest of the comic.
That's awesome.
Is going into
because back when I was doing the DVD, there was like nothing, and then there was like especially nothing about like what the ending was, right?
Yeah,
and I had to like go on Italian eBay and I found the final issue, and I found a guy who had it. And he was like, well, I don't ship to America. And like, so I had to DM him and be like, hey, listen, I'll just send you all the money. Like, cause he was worried. Cause like, apparently he's been ripped off by Americans before, like buying stuff and then returning it or whatever. And I was just like, listen, I'll just send you all the money. You can keep it. I'll just put the gamble on it arriving or not. But like, I had to convince him of it to even mail it to me. Mm-hmm. And then when I got the book, I ended up like scanning all of it and like can't remember, like I went on some image board or something and they like did a rough translation of it for me to figure out like what's going on, and like the whole ending of it is just bonkers where they bring Jesus back to life through like cloning and just like all this stuff that like doesn't. I'm like, how did this get here? Like I like missing 30 volumes of it.
Yeah, it's not that out of line from other things that happen in that comic. They cloned Sherlock Holmes at one point.
Yeah,
Merlin shows up.
I owned volumes 1 to 12 of the French. I bought them off of Kijiji for like $50. I was just like, oh, that's the deal. And I don't know French, and I was flipping through it, and I'm like, this is not the cartoon at all.
No.
I'm like, what is going on here? I don't like this, actually.
I would argue that like the cartoon is better than the comic books, personally.
Yeah, me too. 100,000 million %.
Because the comic book, which it has like neat stuff in it, like it's interesting to read it because the etymology of, I mean, is that even the right word, etymology? But like the origin of like how you got from this comic to what you see in the cartoon is really fascinating. And then there's sort of like hints of what the cartoon could have become. But like it's so like there are parts of it that are just like so crass and gross, and it's got like that sort of very 90s repulsive like pervert humor in it, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah. It's not only loaded with sexual content, it is actually defined by it. In any given chapter, if a female character shows up, there's like a 75% chance that you will either see her naked or having sex with somebody before that chapter is over, including the shorter 12-page chapters.
Yeah.
There is a lot about the comic I like, but I think, as you mentioned in the commentary on the DVD, which we should probably point out, that DVD is very out of print now, unfortunately. So if you have a copy, you're lucky.
Right,
hold on to that. I got a copy too, and it's great.
That's one of those ones which I really, really would like to bring back into print or do a Blu-ray at some point. Yeah, if you want more Cybersix, make your voice heard, because that, like I said, it was my first show I produced for Discotek, and it's very close to my heart, and I would love to put that on Blu-ray because, like, unfortunately, the show is so well animated that, like, even with the highest of bit rate on DVD, like, there are scenes where, like, I know there's the scene in there where with the eyeball, that episode with the eyeball, there's like so much going on in that episode that even at the highest bit rate that I could encode the episodes, it's still blocky, and it's like, man, this needs a Blu-ray so bad. So yeah, if you want Cybersix on Blu-ray, please ask for it. Like, just please.
In a Twitter post right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks for doing your part. I lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, we're comparing the comics to the animated show. Maybe this is a good opportunity just to sort of talk about the premise or the story itself. They diverge a lot, but what's interesting about the comic, or what's interesting about the animated show, is that even though it is the final product is this show commercially targeted at the 11, 12-year-old audience.
Really?
From this,
yeah.
Well, yeah.
That's what they wanted.
Yeah.
11, 12? Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's about how I'd pin it. I'm
a little older than that, like teenager. I see. Maybe.
I mean, nowadays it would be very at home with shows like Owl House or Adventure Time, or like a lot of the kids shows nowadays. There are kids shows, and a lot of them that skew for 14, 15, 16.
Yeah,
and
it seems too beautiful to waste on a 12-year-old. Honestly.
Yeah. Well,
oh yeah. Like I mean, when I saw it first, I enjoyed it. I was captivated by it for certain, but I didn't appreciate just how good a quality a production it was at that time. That's sort of what kind of grabbed me later.
Well, there wasn't a market for it though. Like a show like that, there really wasn't a market for a show toned like that. Even stuff like Batman the Animated Series, which skewed older, still was more friendly for kids, where this did not have that sort of like aspect to it, I don't feel.
I mean, yeah, they removed all the blood, right? So that's usually like teen plus is when there's blood in play. Anyway,
sorry, I was saying this might be a good opportunity just to talk about the premise, sort of summarize just what Cybersix is in a nutshell. So Cybersix is an artificial human who was created by the mad scientist
Von Richter.
Von Richter, who hides in a lab deep in the Amazon rainforest. His plot is to invade cities around the world and replace, well, either leaders or prominent figures, or just people in general, with his own creations. And his first target is the breathtaking nearby city of Meridiana, which is supposed to be located in Mato Grosso, Brazil. The animated series kind of fudges that a little bit by making it a coastal city. Anyway, that's why there's an evil German scientist in the show, by the way, because it's in Brazil. Cybersix was thought to have been destroyed as a child, along with the rest of von Richter's cyber series. But for unexplained reasons, in the TV series at least, she managed to escape and hides in the city disguised by day as the male literature teacher, Adrian Seidelman. And at night, she wanders the city hunting von Richter's creations to feed on their sustenance, which is the artificial substance she requires in order to continue living. Although, in the animated series, sustenance is only mentioned in the first episode and the final episode. So I find that there are things I like about both the animated series and the comic. I do find I think they both do a good job of kind of establishing the premise in different ways. The comic completely info dumps everything right up front. It explicitly explains everything, which is not so bad because there's a lot of neat details, especially when it's focusing on the core storyline and just themes of humanity and spirituality. But it kind of drifts away from that general premise pretty quickly. But the animated series also kind of has the same problem, where it does a good job of setting things up, but it kind of falls into a
like a Monster of the Week formula, essentially.
Monster of the Week format. After that, so it's like both these versions, they kind of don't quite know what to do with this great premise. But the animated show, by contrast, doesn't really. There's a lot that's changed, but there's a lot that's not really changed because they just don't explain it. Like the Nazi stuff and Cybersix's actual sort of backstory and how Adrian was, someone who died in a car crash and she assumed his identity. Like I kind of touched on before, the fact that this information is missing is part of what kind of makes it captivating, because you can tell there's this bigger, it's part of this big story.
I feel like that was a season 2 thing.
What is happening?
They were just like, yeah, we're going to get into this when we go to season 2, and then it just happened, right?
I was gonna say, like, they would have probably revealed like how Adrian became a teacher, like all that stuff.
Yeah.
If they hit it a season 2. Yeah, because like you said in the comic book, Adrian escapes von Richter's lab and then like stumbles upon a car crash where the family died and like ends up posing as the son of that family so she can get like access to the city, right? Whereas in the cartoon, it's just kind of like, oh, this is the Clark Kent secret identity, right? Like, but like almost literally, except like not as like beefy and strapping as Clark Kent. And there's that sort of dichotomy of like Adrian seems really weak, but isn't, right? And then they like team Adrian up with Lucas, who is sort of a jockish character, but at the same time is like just totally like, we're bros now, right? Like we're buddies immediately.
You want to go see a romance film? Like...
Yeah, exactly. Like he's like all in from the beginning. And there's like, what struck me about it, their friendship, is like it goes so against like the stereotypes of the time, where like a character as like jockish and strong as him would be like at first at least be sort of like an asshole, but he's just like, nah, man, like he seems like kind of like gym bros nowadays, like the gym bros from like Mob Psycho 100, who are immediately accepting of Mob, even though he's tiny and not really super strong. And then you get that sort of fun like love triangle with two people of like Adrian, Cybersix, and Lucas. And then on top of that, like Lucas, who is, that like the strapping muscular man, is often like the damsel in distress too in the show, whereas Cybersix is sort of like always saving him and is the one who's like the one who can fight the what is that, fixed ideas, I believe they're called, what the monsters are.
Yeah.
And so like they have this like really interesting setup in the cartoon that was like, even though it's sort of more like coded that way, they don't like outright say it, and it's like really subtle, and like I always really thought that was cool.
Me too. Oh my god, for sure. As like a little girl watching this growing up, I was just like, oh my goodness, there's one where it's the opposite way. Like you've got 100,000 other shows out there to just like, okay, the guy's gonna save the girl, okay, she's gonna scream and whatever, but like to see Cybersix just be the opposite of that, I was just like, oh, there's one. Great.
And the other thing too is they do a really good job of making sure Lucas doesn't seem weak, right? Like he doesn't seem weak. It's just that he's up against such odds that only Cybersix can face them, right? So it's so cool. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I wish the show continued.
And he does help too. He finds out the what is it? The science thing. He makes the eye freeze, I think, something like that.
Oh yeah, he's always investigating, yeah, but like never at like the detriment of like Cybersix as a character, right? And like, and she's written very like ponderously, and like she's like sort of like, I don't want to say at odds with her secret identity, but like it's obvious like she's into Lucas, but at the same time like can she be with him? And then her secret identity complicates that, and like it has all those really fun tropes of like Superman or Batman or whatever, but sort of flipped on its head, and it's just so fun. Like it's like one of those shows where like, man, they like sort of set all this stuff like subtly up in the first season, and where it would have went in the second season probably would have been like just amazing.
Maybe let's talk a little more about our personal histories with the show. Z, did you you talked a little about watching it as a kid. Did you have anything else you wanted to sort of get into about that?
I did. I watched it a lot as a kid. One of my very first ever sketchbooks that I decided to like start drawing in, I would record things from TV on VHS, and Inuyasha was in there, and Cybersix was in there, and that's one of the first things that I just like looked at on my TV and just like tried to copy and try to draw. So like that's like one of the big stepping stones of me becoming an artist and like my style and stuff. I think it's very Cybersix influenced, I think, especially like formative years, that sort of thing. I did want to talk about how it's kind of very similar to Reboot, I think, in that like
such a cool show.
The strong female lead that has like a romance. And like I really identified with that as a kid as well. Like you did not see that at any other type of show, and like also Reboot did really poorly in the US, and that's why it got canceled as well. So I'm just like, I don't know. I don't know if there's a pattern here forming.
Reboot's such an interesting show too, because Dot is, even though she's not a guardian, like the equal of Bob, right? And they make it very clear that like she's just as capable. I mean, I especially like I remember the episode where she reboots and she's like the princess, and she's like, no, screw this, and like rips like the skirt off and everything, and becomes the hero of the game. Like that episode like strikes me, and I think that like that show also is like I guess it didn't find its audience. I mean, it was on ABC here, and then
it found its audience here for sure. It was like around the clock, but like ABC did not know what to do with it at all.
Yeah, and I mean, also like it. I will say though that Reboot did find its audience here when it went to Cartoon Network, because like that was the right, like the time before wasn't the right time for it, but when it got on Toonami, it did. I mean, it did well enough that like they had made that fourth season, right? For both Teletoon and Toonami. So like I don't think
YTV,
yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, YTV.
It's okay.
Yes, it was.
Season 4 aired on Toonami first before we got it as the episodes. So that was definitely a factor in getting that last little bit.
Yeah, which
produced.
I always am like, why did you not make an ending on this season? Like you've had so.
There's a lot. There's a whole podcast on that.
Yeah, why? Like why?
Yes.
But anyway, like I 100% see the similarities between those shows, because like it too, again, like a Canadian written show, almost primarily Canadian written show created, where it's got that kind of same vibe where the heroine is a very strong character and not like subordinate to the male hero. Yeah, and I mean, like, also the cool thing too is she becomes like the command.com or like the leader of Mainframe by the end of it.
Exactly, it was a great role model for me to see as a child. Like, I was enjoying my time there, and then also there was like Calamity Jane, but I only saw that for like when it came on. I don't think it was Canadian, so it was only just like on there, and then it was gone. And I'm like, was that like a dream? Did I have a dream about that? Or...
That's the way a lot of people remember.
Yeah, that's a weird one where it was produced by a co-production. And between like WB America and stuff, and then they aired it for 2 episodes, and they were just like, nope. Like it was like no.
The whole thing did air on Teletoon, though.
Yeah, I remember being on Teletoon.
even close to as much as something like Cybersix
No.
ran, because of course I don't think that Calamity Jane was CanCon, so that's why Cybersix got run so much. Because it's kind of funny, not a single pencil was lifted to produce the animation in Cybersix, and yet it counts as 100% Canadian content and gets run over and over again, regardless of how popular it is, and thus makes it popular, which I guess is how the cultural aspect of that works.
I mean, I think it's the same with Reboot as well, because I believe YTV put money into Reboot, so they were just able to like play it as much as they wanted to, and they probably could.
Yeah.
And all of the voice people and all that stuff.
Hey, why don't we talk about the cast a little more? We touched on Terry Klassen a little bit, who in addition to writing, sorry,
I was going to say, in addition to being the writer, he's Von Richter.
He's Von Richter, yes. And Kathy Wesseluk, she's marvelous in everything that she does, but I think that Cybersix and Adrian, which is definitely I would say they're almost two different roles, because she puts so much nuance into each part of that character, and she handles it
well, I mean,
so well.
Yeah, I mean, she's got crazy range, like, she's Spike in My Little Pony, which is like that hyped up little boy, and then she was like classically like Shampoo and Ranma 1/2 and all that, but like she even played characters like, I think it's Nier from Death Note as well, which is like on these like crazy different ends of the spectrum. And so like when like in reviewing like Cybersix now, it's like I wouldn't say it's not surprising. It's like it's not super surprising that she can handle it, because she's just amazing. And I think like I wish she had more like dramatic animation to work on, because like I think she's like marvelous in this. And also I will say very, very like she loves this show. Like she was like immediately on board. Like when I found out I figured out like her like agent or whatever, and she was like immediately like wanting to do something for the show, because like she had such fond memories of it and wished it didn't end.
Yeah, she frequently was a guest at Vancouver conventions. Every time she would gush endlessly about Cybersix and how disappointed she was that it would never, or that it didn't continue, or that it likely would not come back. You could tell that was a really special role for her. For
Lucas, I mean, you couldn't cast a more manly sounding voice than Michael Dobson, right? One of the Dobson brothers.
Michael is he is so awesome. Like when I was doing the scanlation for Cybersix, this isn't a good way to do it. But whenever I was having trouble on trying to nail down like how Lucas's dialogue would sound, I just try to, even though the character is a little different in the animated version versus the comic, I try to imagine how it would sound coming out of if Michael Dobson was doing the voice.
That's funny.
Just to kind of massage things a little bit.
Yeah.
I thought it kind of worked okay. Again, not the best approach for that kind of thing when you're supposed to, recognize the differences in doing that translation. But I just couldn't get that voice out of my head for Lucas. It's just so, so graphed in there. Janice Jowd has a number of roles in this as well. She usually is a monster of the week kind of voice actor anyway. She does a lot of those types of voices in like Inuyasha and stuff. And
that's where she's from. Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah.
I was just watching Griselda. Well, I think her name's Griselda.
Yeah, she's Griselda. She was Elaine in Full Moon Fascination. And she's Lori as well. We haven't talked much about Lori yet.
Lori's great.
She's
she's got cactuarian hair. She's great.
Yeah, also one of the most interesting adaptations. And the one where they actually changed her name from the comic too. She's Lori Carderas in the comic, and she's Lori Anderson in the animated version.
Trying to Americanize it a little bit, I guess.
Yeah,
the American audience.
Yeah, I mean, she's typically, as you're saying, like cast as like really evil, because she's got that Ojo-sama voice, right?
She does, yeah.
And so like to have her be Lori is really interesting, and like in the comic, she is like that typical 90s, really horrifically. I'm trying to think of a good a nice way to describe her in the comic, because like she just wants to like sleep with Adrian. Like that's her whole thing, right? Like
I think we could say she is sleazy.
Promiscuously sleazy.
Promiscuous and sleazy. There you go. That's a good way of putting it, I think. And again, it's sort of interesting how she was in the comic and how they arrived at her much, not completely different, but much softer, much cuter kind of interpretation of the character. Also, she was blonde in the comic and the live action drama. She was supposed to be blonde. They made her a redhead. Good call, I say.
Yeah. I mean, like she's got that kind of like fiery personality. Yeah. But like, I mean, it's interesting too in the cartoon because like she's kind of like a little like I would say ditzy in the cartoon and like Love Struck by Adrian, but like. They also sort of make a point that like she, if I remember correctly, like she's like really good at schoolwork and stuff though. Like she's not like dumb, right? Like they like because I remember at the end like she's like is she like preparing for college or something like that? Like towards the end of it, I can't remember exactly, but I remember like there was like this dichotomy of like she's a little bit of a ditz and she's kind of like a fiery character, but also like she's not dumb and she's like smart in school. Like if I remember right.
Yeah, and she's still part of a gang. So she's
too.
Yeah, that was like her defining trait originally, and they still stay true to that. But the gang's only a little bad in the animated version.
They only try to steal Adrian's apple or whatever they're trying to do in that first episode.
And I guess we got to talk about Jose too, who's Alex Doduk. I don't think he's done much since the early 2000s. I think he had a lot of child roles back then.
Was he a child?
He was a child at the time. Yeah.
He was like 10 years old. Like
wow.
Yeah, like
kind of rare, right? No,
yeah.
I don't know.
They were Kathy talks about him in her commentary, and I was like, oh, really? Like, it's because like I assumed it was maybe an adult with that kind of voice, because like Andrew Francis has a sort of voice like that too.
Yeah, and he plays. He's in it as
Julian.
Yeah.
But yeah, like his voice is crazy, and like part of it too is like they couldn't overtly say they were Nazis, but it was like very clear with like with the goose stepping and stuff. They were supposed to be Nazis, which I think the subtlety is like what makes it a little better for me personally than it being so super overt.
I still think if they had just explicitly said at some point in the show that it was set in Brazil, that could help you piece it together a little better as well, because that's why there's that's why there's this evil German scientist, because it's Brazil. Come on.
But like he,
too, I guess.
I mean, he's sort of the subordinate to Von Richter, and he's young and gets into like crazy, wacky situations, and like in the original comic, he's like also weirdly like a sex fiend and stuff, which is like I'm like, yeah, I'm glad they took this out.
Yeah,
I'm really uncomfortable with that part.
It's a very uncomfortable part of his character in the comic.
Yeah.
The purpose of that apparently was to keep him distracted so he wouldn't try and stage a coup d'etat and take over and kill Von Richter. Sort of just keep him in line.
But it made him really like marshmallows. They didn't have to make him a sex pervert.
Yeah.
Seriously. I mean, part of it too, though, is like, and they don't really reveal it in the cartoon, but he's like a clone of Von Richter. Yeah. So like
they imply it when he says that he's not a child, but they don't delve into it at all. Which I guess that probably is something they may have gotten into in season 2, because that's clearly kind of where they were probably going to go with it. But again, it's just never explicitly stated. You're kind of wondering what this weird kid is. It's like, is he really his son? There's something up there. It's there's something not quite right about that.
Yeah, that's where I noped out of the comics. Honestly, I was just like, I'm done here. Yep. But yeah, Data 7. Have we talked about Data 7 yet? Is it Data 7 or is it Data 7 ? Because I want to
Data 7. There's a big kitty in this show, and he was a good boy. Scott McNeil is his voice too.
Really?
He doesn't typically do animal. Scott McNeil has done just about everything. He doesn't typically do animal voices, but he got the role as Data 7, and he's convincing. But yeah, Data 7, another very unique concept. Who's actually pretty much comes over. Same idea from the comic as well.
He's pretty verbatim to the comic. Because but his story is also like way more straightforward in terms of like not having like some weird sexual deviancy stuff like attached to it.
Exactly. But it's a strange choice that this childhood essentially brother of Cybersix has now been brought back as this Panther, and it's just one of those aspects of the story. It's just like, wow, how did you even kind of arrive at this?
I thought it was really weird how they never tried to get the brain out of the panther and back into a human body. Like how you're just staring a panther forever, I guess, is the thing. They're just like, well, okay. I make us your character now.
As it's become our callback, probably in season 2, right?
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah, I guess. But no, it seemed like they were just fine with it. They're just like, all right, now we're fighting crime together. You're my pants buddy.
Yeah. Did we ever see anything else from the Data series? I think it was Data 7. Because it was supposed to be that series was supposed to be specifically animals,
Right.
with the same types of brains as von Richter's other creations. I think that was the idea, but they didn't really get into that too much. I don't think they got into that too much even in the comic. Just what a striking image that creates for this series. You have this lady in a tight leather outfit running around this incredibly exquisite South American city with a panther following her around. I mean, it just creates such a strong impression. You can kind of see why why this concept was able to survive so much of the adaptation process in the end.
Really cool looking. I don't know what to tell you. I was just like, oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I want to.
I mean, it's a cool idea. I mean, I do think, as cool as the show is, like, it is a little hamstrung by the fact that there was no second season to develop all this stuff further.
Yeah.
Like they seeded everything in perfectly and started setting up these characters. Like, I wouldn't have wanted more information in season 1, because like I would assume, oh well, season 2 they'll just get more into this and they'll get into like. I mean, I don't even think they really established von Richter's plot of like infiltrating humanity that well either. With his creations to take over stuff.
He's depicted as a pretty... I mean, he actually does a little bit of it, like with the police chief that was replaced with a techno. So you're getting little hints of what he's trying to do. But usually he's just kind of depicted as a generic megalomaniac who wants to destroy the city for some reason. Mm-hmm. Presumably to, pull a Dr. Eggman and rebuild it with creations of his own, which are much better than what was there before. Yeah, but that's kind of what we get in season 1. Season 1 for that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The final episode, Final Confrontation. Did you get like a Watchmen vibe from that at all when you were watching it? Was it in the comics, that like big monster that just like blows up the thing? Or have you seen the Watchmen?
Yeah, that is kind of similar now that you pointed out. I never thought of that before.
Yeah,
when I was watching, I was like, oh, I wonder why they did that.
The thing is like, other than characters and certain story aspects, like, they sort of did what, like, they sort of like were doing their own thing to a degree, especially with the monsters and like the finale and stuff. So like, I really don't. From what I read of the comic, I don't remember there ever being a situation quite like what happens at the end of the cartoon.
Like I mentioned before, it's not a coastal city in the comic either, because it's in Mato Grosso, which is right in the middle of Brazil. But here, right from the beginning, in the early episodes, they establish, it has this meridian, it has this coast. So they were kind of setting up for that finale pretty early on. And I think the show is a lot of, again, it's Monster of the Week. There's a lot of playing around. I think, maybe we should talk about the individual writers, because they hired sci-fi writers to cover most of these episodes, like Catherine Gerzik and Jono Howard. That's sort of what their background was. Is that's right, Brady? And a lot of the stories they're kind of broad sci-fi concepts, which are just sort of backwards engineered into von Richter's plot somehow. And it doesn't always work, but it just sort of, they're kind of playing around and seeing how to make this concept play out with that approach. But in the last couple episodes, I think that's where they really kind of get things figured out and streamline things, and then it stops.
Yeah, they're definitely feeling out how to do it, right? They're because they're given this source material that isn't, in terms of plot, super strong. It's really more like the comics are strong in concept, right? Like in it's the execution isn't, and I'm not trying to, this was obviously created by two people who were very into it, and they create a really cool thing, but they also didn't like execute the idea to its fullest potential.
Definitely not.
And so like the people who are adapting this into a cartoon sort of had a kind of a not a complete carte blanche, but like a very like wide breadth they could do to change things up. And it's very obvious, like they're really trying to figure out like the rhythm of this show, right? Like they didn't figure out the exact quite beat or tempo of it and they were sort of getting there by the end, and that's why it's like so tragic that they didn't do a second season, because like you can see the promise of like what could come with a serialized show like this, where they have like, because they had like the aspects of Serial in there, right, where they were like, oh, Von Richter has this plot, what is he doing? Oh, there's Jose, what is his story? What's his backstory? How does he connect? Like, well, maybe like there are so many possibilities too. Like Jose could have turned on Von Richter and become one of the good guys, or like you could have done so many different things. And like, where would they take Lori? And they had set all these things up, and they just didn't get to pay that off with that second season.
Yeah.
Like it reminds me of a lot of the first season of Big O in a way, where there's all this potential, but like by the end of it, you have no idea what the bigs are, the mega deuces or whatever, right? Like they just have all this really cool potential, and they did these cool stories, but they didn't have the time to pay it all off until that second season, which, it's divisive, but at least you kind of understand what it is. Whereas this, like, you have all this setup and all this potential, and then it's just never paid off.
So the other Batman clone. People call Cybersix Batman clone.
Maybe the other thing to touch on is how this show is kind of double written in a way with its co-production, or as a co-production, because you had the writers on the Canadian side of things who were writing the scripts, but it was also being scripted visually on the Japanese side. At least that's kind of what the credits always suggested, because they because you had Japanese people credited as story writers on it,
like scenario
writers. Yeah. And I know that I think, as we kind of touched on, or as you've mentioned before, the production is characterized a lot. There's all sorts of stories about it where a lot of people didn't really seem to be on the same page, or there were a lot of contradicting stories about how people found or people's experiences, or there were language barriers or things like that, which is all pretty typical for an international co-production like this. But I think that the fact that everything came together as well as it did is probably a testament to Hervé Bedard and the approach he was trying to use through Network of Animation, NOA. And that's part of the tragedy, I think, because I think that he was able to, with his whole approach with that company, he was able to create something really unique that we haven't really seen before or since. But with the show not getting its second half due to the failure on Fox Kids, it not only resulted in Cybersix ending, it sort of ended NOA as well, because they never produced anything again after Cybersix, and we never. And I'm just wondering if it had just succeeded on Fox Kids, maybe we wouldn't have only gotten a second season of Cybersix, but we would have seen this approach continue with other international properties, and could have created like other very unique productions that were similar. It's so unfortunate.
I mean, Bedard was an interesting guy. I mean, I'm not actually. I mean, is he still alive? I'm not.
That's
sure.
what I wanted to know. I can't. Like, there doesn't seem. He seemed to have. At least when you sort of look online, he's kind of vanished. I'm sure if I asked like my animator friends, maybe someone would know what happened to him. Yeah, I don't know what's happened to him. Yeah. But
like, his history was with Geek, right? So like he had worked on stuff like The Real Ghostbusters, which is a show which is very much like this in such that it's a show aimed for kids, but like the first 65 episodes of that show are written very smartly for adults as well, right? That's a sort of spooky horror anthology show at its core, just sort of wrapped up in the Ghostbusters license, which is why that show is so well remembered, because it has like spooky stories like the day that what was it When Halloween Was Forever, or the Collect Call from Cthulhu, like stuff like that. Like it has those pulp noir stories to it, and it skews a little adult, and it sort of scares you a little bit, and which I think is also part of Cybersix's charm, where like these creatures aren't pretty, right? Like they're kind of scary. They're scary monsters that she's fighting, and like these shows, like I think that he probably looked at that and said, like, I want to do this myself, like not under the like auspices of a different company. Like I want to make my own company. That's what I always sort of figured anyway. And he, reading about him and doing research on him, and I found a bunch of articles in like trade magazines and stuff like that about him, and like he seemed like crazy savvy, where like he went to Argentina or whatever, and like convinced them to sell the rights to Cybersix to him for production for $1, and then
for $1,
like,
yeah.
for $1, and then like he left, and then like immediately was like trying to sell the show to get it created, and like he like it feels like he sort of like engineered this from nothing, right? Just with like his hard work and guts to steal a term from another show I've been working on. But it feels like he just he was just like I'm gonna will this to happen out of nothing, and he did, and like that's what kind of makes it sad that like NOA didn't like do another property like this where it was a sort of like more adult leaning thing. But yeah, like you can definitely see his origins in like shows like that, like Real Ghostbusters and whatnot, where they skewed a little bit more outside of the norm of children's TV, right? Like, and that's definitely one of the things that's sad about this.
Yeah, what started this whole project was because he thought that the animation market had become oversaturated with shows for children, and he wanted to make something older skewing, something for adults. That's how things started, and then TMS wanted to tone it down again, down to that tween audience, to make it sure it was easier to sell internationally, and he ultimately accepted those compromises. Again, it is the fact that he and NOA and everyone involved was able to still sort of keep the essence of this project alive even through all of that. Really, I think it is a testament to the perceptive insight that he had when looking at this property initially. Because like he I think he could really see the heart of it, really see what makes this interesting and distinct. And it wasn't the things that were on the surface. Like I mentioned before, the original comic, it's defined by its sexuality, but there's much more to what makes Cybersix unique than just that.
When you dig into it though, it's like, oh, you have all this sort of like the sexual aspect to it, but like underneath it, it's like, oh, it has all these really cool science fiction concepts, right? Like,
right, yeah. Like, what is life?
Like, are you human? What is being human? What is love? Like it has all that stuff underneath it. It's just kind of like buried under a lot of like chaffy, right? Like, so it's like it's interesting in that way. And like I think also like you're right, and I think that like it's a show to me now that it's like, oh, they would make this now, right? Like it people always say, well, it's so ahead of its time, but like it really was in a way ahead of the curve, where there would be a market now for 16, 17-year-olds to watch a show like this. For sure. I mean, like a lot of the teen Netflix shows and all that stuff are sort of aimed at kids like that. Like I said, also like Owl House or was it Infinity Train or stuff like that shows up on like Cartoon Network or Disney or what have you. Like those shows are for kids, but they skew older and they have more adult situations that sort of happen in them, and also, they're and in those, shows made by big companies, again, like Disney or Nickelodeon or whatever. I mean, like also like you had Avatar, The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra and all that. And those, pushed boundaries as well. Yeah. Those, happened like shortly after this. And, you have shows like these, which are slowly, I don't want to say bending the rules, but like changing the landscape of television to be more accepting of, people who are LGBTQ, right? Like, so like, which, this show touches on, even though it doesn't overtly do that. And like, then you have shows like Legend of Korra, where it's very obvious they wanted to have, a bi or lesbian couple, right, with Korra and Asami. And then they really couldn't show that, right? So they had to do it more subtly. And now you have cartoons where, people can be gay and be in a cartoon, right? Which we've had, TV shows forever where there are gay characters and they're represented well, but it's only very recently in the last couple of years where we have cartoons for kids that actually have normal characters who aren't like a very special episode characters, right? They're just normal people who just happen to be gay. They're not the gay character. They're a character who is a character who also happens to be gay, right? And that's just only recently happening, and you can kind of see that starting back 20 years ago with Cybersix, right? So
yeah, at the time this was made for action animation, pretty much the only way to get a show made is if you could sell toys along with it. That was the only business model that really existed for this kind of thing. And Cybersix, in its very roundabout production, kind of started to find a way around that, but obviously didn't pan out in the end because of the weird Fox Kids deal.
Well, I mean, part of it is too, like, it seemed to me that TMS wanted their international action adventure show, right?
Yeah.
So it seems like TMS fronted a lot of the money, and so did Bedard, right? They were like, we'll try and get a toy license after we get the show going, because this isn't Batman, this isn't Superman, this isn't, My Little Pony or something. There was no built-in audience for it, so they had to try and come up with something first. So like they sort of gambled their money, which is why it ultimately probably didn't continue, because they didn't get toy toy company interested. Yeah. Because like if you look back at the original Ninja Turtles, like Ninja Turtles is very similar to that it was created by two indie creators who were sort of like their comic book got popular, and they were trying to find ways to market it, and they did a lot of things like RPG books and all of that. But it wasn't until they found a investor in Playmates Toys, who has always had the Ninja Turtles license, that it really blew up, because Playmates put all the money into the original cartoon when it first came out, the 5-part miniseries. They paid for that completely themselves to market these toys as a commercial for these toys. And so like in a very like similar situation that went the complete opposite direction, like Cybersix is similar to, where it was an indie comic that by grit and hard work became a cartoon, but they never got that toy bump that Ninja Turtles did, because like Ninja Turtles would never have survived if they didn't have the toys that were super popular.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was just thinking how obviously that old production method where you had to have merchandise attached to it, which is why action shows could really only exist if they were targeted for a youth audience. That is finally kind of ended, and a big part of that is because of streaming. Because now the show I was thinking of was Trece on Netflix, which is based off of a Filipino comic, I believe. Kind of a similar situation to Cybersix, but obviously the also only lasted one season. I think it's maybe a give sort of an idea of what something like Cybersix might look like today, if it were created now.
I've never heard of that personally. I'm not familiar.
Heard it either.
It's pretty good. It's on Netflix. If you still have Netflix, I recommend it. It's only a few episodes, and it's a little, actually, also very heavy on the lore, and kind of a little maybe tricky to follow if you're not familiar with mythology from that part of the world. But
what's the premise of it?
It's basically a supernatural detective show.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
Yeah. It's worth checking out for sure.
Is it animated, live action? What is it?
It is animated.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. I think it's a US Philippine co-production.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's good. It's just 6 episodes. But it's I would say it is worth your time. It's pretty unique. For me, man. Yeah, I know, right?
I'm all in on short shows, and that's why I sort of like, just because of my time, constraints, right? It's easier to get through like a British show of like 8 episodes or something.
Yeah. Now, Brady, if Discotek can't get the legal details sorted out to put Cybersix out on Blu-ray, how would you feel about if they licensed the Argentinian live-action drama to put out under their live-action label? You think that'd be a viable alternative?
I mean, I've seen clips of it. It doesn't look promising, but we also put out weird stuff, so who knows? There
is now, just in the last few years, somebody found the full first episode and a few other clips. It is on Vimeo. You can watch it. It is not good, but boy, it's interesting. Reminds me it came out in 1996, which was 1 year before Batman and Robin. Reminds me a lot of Batman and Robin. Everything is very colorful. There's lots of Dutch angles. Everything seems to be shot in like a really cramped soundstage all the time. And
So it would be post Batman Forever, right? So that style was sort of out there, just not.
Yeah, post Batman Forever might be a better way of putting it. Yeah. Also, Jose is like 25 in this because I guess they, as I said before, the animated series kind of found deeper nuances to hone in on for Cybersix that make it, looking into what made the property really great. The live action drama just kind of seizes everything that's on the surface, all the like salacious stuff, and just completely revels in it. So it's arguably all the stuff that people don't like from the comic, just foaming to the top.
Yeah, I do also want to say that like I'm personally not against like sexual content or whatever. It's just that I don't think we've done it justice just how crass Cybersix is.
It is very it's it's like
a whole another level.
Yeah, it is. Like I said, it is a comic defined by its sexuality, and and this is embraced in the live action and very clumsily at that. Like I mentioned, Jose is 25, obviously because they want to focus on his overabundant sex drive. Interesting note: during a scene when he's like kind of getting it on with one woman, they play "The Future" by Leonard Cohen. And I remember that in one of the early chapters of Cybersix, they quote a Leonard Cohen song. And I found that to be kind of an a little bit of an interesting touch on there.
So I like when I did my research, there was not a lot of information about this, and I might not be remembering because it was 10 years ago, but it was like people weren't sure if it was a pilot, a whole series, or just a movie. And so what exactly is this? Was there a series, or was there just a
series?
Okay, so there was a full series.
Yeah, full series. I think it was either 10 or 13 episodes. Ran on Argentinian terrestrial television in 1996. And yeah, it's not very good.
I couldn't get through it, honestly. All of the what do they call it? The transitions through everything were all like the comics and everything, and it's just kind of like the Marvel logo a bit, but if it was done really crappily. And like, oh man, there's this one part where she's like running through the buildings, and I'm just like, I have to look away because it's like it looks like it was done in a high school.
Yeah,
almost. Oh man.
Yeah, the effects of her jumping off of buildings are incredibly bad. Like you can tell that they're trying to make a limited budget work in some scenes, but not in others. And it also has, like you mentioned, weird transitions using art from the comics, with a real like, oh, it's your favorite comic come to life kind of vibe. That's always awful.
Yeah, I couldn't get through it. I'm so sorry.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
okay. I can't.
I tried to watch it, but I can only get through clips of it, and also it's. I can watch really bad VHS, but the quality of it's so bad that it's sometimes hard to discern what's going on in it too.
It's almost otherworldly in that sense.
Yeah. It's
there's no subtitles, and if there's no story that I can follow along to, I can't really justify watching 25 minutes or
45 minutes.
45
minutes.
Yeah, each episode's it's an hour drama with commercials.
Is it the first episode, or is it just a random?
It is the first episode that they found. Yeah,
but no more has been found since then.
Yeah, just a few clips and next episode previews. Yeah, Yashimoto's in the first episode. So it's kind of jumping around a little bit in a way that's unexpected. But yeah, again, drama, interesting contrast from the animated show for sure, as far as adaptations go, and further cements that just how great and unique this series really is. There's one last thing I wanted to mention, just about my own background with this show. The time I watched it the most was when it was running on Teletoon's Detour block. Now, when I say the Detour block, I don't mean the later version of their Detour block when it was that adult lineup. It was during that brief time when they were trying to make a teen lineup on weeknights.
Yeah, like Adult Swim.
Yeah, it was, but it was before Teletoon Unleashed. So it was like an hour where they would run quote unquote teen shows, and they ran it back to back with Ripping Friends. Which was
Ripping Friends.
Yeah. Also, which was also they had a censored version of that running on Fox Kids at the time. But more interestingly, when Cybersix was running, like weeknights at 9, and they ran it so much. They ran those 13 episodes every night for I think over a year or close to a year. And I got to say that if you watch it that much, you definitely start picking apart a lot of the flaws in the show a lot more when it's something you're watching constantly and something that's not on.
Did you watch it that much?
No, so I didn't. But Teletoon is just something I had on in the background a lot of the time. And interestingly, the Detour block ran back to back with the Teletoon Retro block. And because they used it as a way of just dumping CanCon in the middle of the night, they ran Rocket Robin Hood. Brady, are you familiar with Rocket Robin Hood?
Sorry.
No. What's that?
So Rocket Robin Hood is this terrible Canadian animated show from the 1960s. It was made by the same studio that did the Spider-Man animated series.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And notably, it also had a second season that was directed by Ralph Bakshi. And a lot of the second season episodes were actually reused as Spider-Man episodes, just with Rocket Robin Hood removed and Spider-Man put in. If you thought that second season of the Spider-Man 60s show was cheap, like you don't even know the full context because they were just like sharing materials between these two shows. It was really bad. Well, I mean, very atmospheric and memorable in a lot of ways, but also very bad. Well,
I mean, it's one of those things that sounds like the production of it is more interesting than the show itself, right? Like it has like such a cool story behind it.
Yeah, they were literally people talk about it all the time thinking that certain animated shows were made by people on drugs, which is never true. And always an unfair assessment for the work of very creative people who are working on an animated thing. Rocket Robin Hood, many of the people who worked on it literally were on drugs at the time. And it's the type of show that results from that.
Wow.
But it is one of the worst animated TV shows you'll ever see. And I always just kind of loved watching the contrast going from that Canadian production to Cybersix, because it's like complete ends of the scale there, back to back. And even though I didn't watch every episode of Cybersix all the time when it ran that frequently, I did make appointment viewing to try to watch the opening theme every time it aired, because it is even when I was going back to watch it now, I didn't like sit down and watch through every episode or everything. I just kind of had it on background. But when that opening comes on, I just drop everything and watch it. It is so good. I think it is
because deep in your heart, Level survives.
Yes.
Right?
It's so beautiful. Oh my god!
And it's just a clip show opening. I think it might be my favorite clip show opening for any television program ever. It's just
interesting.
Yeah,
it's interesting because it's not just a clip show opening though. It's got clips from the show, but it has scenes from the pilot. As well. Yeah, which is interesting too because it's very, it's a bit different than the show ended up as well.
Jose has a gun.
Jose has a gun in it. Yeah, it's a little more adult, and finding that pilot also was like, I was amazed I was able to, and like I found it on like some Wayback Machine site that was the TMS site.
Oh wow!
And it was like in 120p as like a like real video file or something like that. And I was like, whoa, this is cool. This is in such crappy condition I could never include this. But if TMS has this on their site, I can probably get them to find it. And so they found me a DVD, like all they could find was like a DVD-R that they used to like promote and sell the show, and they sent me that DVD. And so that's how we got the like full resolution version of it. We could not find the actual like master of it, but yeah, I was like, oh, and because it's got such unique, cool animation in it too. But it is kind of a shame that they never got to do like a real intro. But even still, as a clip show intro, it's beautiful, and like it sets up the mood of the show. Like especially when it starts with them with like the and they're like running over the rooftops, and the fixed ideas are trying to get Cybersix. And like they sort of reveal Adrian, and like that whole thing is like stuck in my brain too, where it's like she's like pondering the duality of her life, and it's kind of interesting too to have like a kid show where the main character is kind of depressed, like doesn't know what they are, or are they human, and are these feelings real? And then like they kind of like show sort of like the dichotomy of that in the intro with like Adrian and Lucas eating together and having a good time and like chatting, which is part of the pilot as well. That scene where it's so overly animated, and it's like it's not just that it's animated well. It's like, you know, the food has all these little details.
There's so much food.
It's moving.
Lucas eats so much.
And it's all moving, and like all of his gestures while he's talking, like even without the dialogue, it's like you can understand like how like into the conversation they are and like how much fun they're having, and it's all thanks to TMS's animation. But yeah, no, I completely understand why you like love that intro because of all that stuff.
Before we wrap up, I just had one more question. You two, do you think we need more Cybersix? Should there be more? Should someone try? Should there be a remake? Do you think there's potential for something like this, or do you think it's better off if we just kind of leave it at what we have?
I would love more personally. If it's in this style, like if it's adapted in the same way, just updated for today's like sensibilities and writing and stuff. I personally wouldn't be as interested in like a direct adaptation of the comic book.
Yeah,
but I would love to have another version of this that's either continues the story or starts it over more modern, and has the same feel as this. Just gets to serialize it out and go the distance.
I would say yes, but only if they have a lot of money.
Yeah.
And they can do it with the same love and care as the original series was done. And also if like all the story writers and everything were either the same or like very, very similar in tone, if they really get it. Because my big disappointment with a lot of series that are just like, hey, it's 10 years later, we're going to continue it, is they just miss how special the series was and what made it special.
The feel of it, like they can't get the quite feel of it.
Yeah, if they can't get it, and if they don't know the story beats that they were going to do in the second season, if they don't have any of that, then there's no point for me. Honestly, I would rather just have the 13 episodes that were just like, oh, this is really good, and then so many people just like pretend other continuations don't even happen because they were kind of
yeah. I mean, you have a point there where a lot of these like 20-year later shows like sort of don't have the feel of it. Like, I mean, they just did that new Night Court, and it does, like, I'm not saying it's bad, but it doesn't have that sardonic feel of the original, right? Whereas, like, they just did that 90s show, and they very smartly brought back a lot of the original writers and creators, and then brought in new blood as well. And that show feels like a real continuation of that 70s show if you watch it, right? Just with a little more hindsight, a little more heart, but you can either go like the one way or the other, right? And like I would much rather have it the way you're saying too. Like, yeah, like have it at least, even if it's a reboot, bring back some of the original creatives to at least get that same flavor, right? Yeah. The flavor is the spice of it is what's important, not the characters.
I was going to say, just get Studio Orange to do a CGI remake and just watch people argue over which one is better or which one you should watch.
Oh, God. Yeah, but like everyone's trying to do Cobra Kai now because Cobra Kai was so well done, and like the reason why it was so well done, it continues to be well done, is because the writers are just like just really into it, right? Like I would be really upset if somebody took Cybersix and then they didn't know what they were doing with it, like reboot.
Reboot, yeah, exactly. I was about to say reboot is the epitome of they did not understand the show, and then the episodes which were meant to be tributes to the fans just sort of made fun of the fans. Yeah. And
huge miscalculation the way that they handled that. It's just like, how did they think this was going to work? How did they think this was going to be received?
Honestly, I would love another show that's like this.
Yeah.
That has like all of this really deep, like what's happening with this woman who's not really a woman, who's like, trying to figure out her place in the world, and like also battling, evil guys and stuff. Just do something else like that. Just do something. You don't have to be Cybersix. You can be something else. But like, I haven't really seen anything that's really like this, honestly. That has like that dark tone. I guess Dark Angel, or what's the name of it? Dark Angel? Was it?
Oh, the Fox show that was similar.
The Fox show, but
it was Dark Angel. Yeah.
So like, I don't know. Just don't make it that similar that they're gonna sue you.
That was, I mean, part of that too was that James Cameron was involved in that, and he has a lot of reach and all of that. So, and that whole thing, it was very hard to find information about it, and there was conflicting reports. Was it involved in its failure? Was it not? Like, all that sort of stuff. So like I really don't know, but it was unfortunate that all of that either way that was in the news and it sort of it was hanging around even if it didn't directly and stop, if it's not the cause of what happened, it was still in the air, and that was kind of like a sour note too, because it's all about perception as well in the outside world. And at the time we weren't connected. Like when this show came out, because nowadays I can like talk to somebody in Argentina in a minute. I could call them right now or type to them or email them or whatever. But back then you couldn't. So like all you had was like printed news and sometimes online stuff, but not really. Like if you had dial up, and we weren't as connected as we are now. So when you hear something, or you read it in a magazine, or it's repeated, like the telephone game, right? Like you're never sure exactly what happened, and that's why a lot of the research for this was really hard too, because like I was literally going through like old news groups trying to make heads or tails of like what happened with this, and it's just a shame that like you will probably never know the real story of it. But yeah, like even sorry to get on a tangent, but yeah, like even a show that was like this would be great too, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's probably the better way to go. I really can't imagine how you could bring this show back for a second season at this point. Like we mentioned before, I don't know if Hervé Bedard is even still alive at this point. It's unclear.
It's mystery.
Yeah. I mean, the approach that he used to bring this show together, it's definitely not something we've seen since. As much as I'd love to see a second season, like bring in crewmans and have him talk about wanting to be cloned into Sharon Stone's body.
I forgot about crewmans. Oh, man.
I think they had plans for him to be in the show. I keep reading that Crewmans is Von Richter's assistant in the comic, and it is implied that he was a lover of Von Richter's. He was a woman, but she pissed him off, and he like put him in this ugly man's body and made him his servant, which is like, oh, that's kind of weird. But yeah, I think there were plans to bring him in. There's apparently some designs for him or something, but he just didn't make the cut. Again, probably something they were planning for season 2. We won't get it.
I just want more action romances.
Yeah.
Just give me an action romance. Like this is a really well done romance, and like the subtleties of like Lucas, and I love it. It's so
that dynamic.
Yeah,
bring that dynamic back of
exactly.
Adrian Lucas and Cybersix, right?
Definitely.
Like that's the key.
It's kind of interesting that Fox Kids picked this up at the same time as Escaflowne, and they both failed, which almost within a week of each other, which is. But both ran in their entirety in Canada and did much better.
Yeah, they played the first episode as the last episode.
Yeah. But we got it. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, that's how there's recordings of all that out there, which is really interesting because like they edited it down to like to 23 episodes or something. I very recently just rewatched Escaflowne, so I actually seeked out the Fox Kids version and I was like comparing it. I was like, wow, this is weird. Like there's like episodes edited together, it's crazy.
It gets a little more balanced out as when you get into the episodes that only ran in the UK or Canada, but still it becomes quite a different show. With the way,
because it got canceled on Fox Kids really quick.
Yeah,
and so I remember the guy who edited it, and I can't remember his name, but I followed him on LiveJournal. Question mark?
I think he was on Usenet posting a lot of stuff.
He was on Usenet
probably
as well.
Both.
Yeah, and I remember him saying that like after episode 6, he didn't have to censor anything. He just had to cut it down to time.
Yeah.
So like after that happened, or after whatever episode was the last Fox Kids episode, or and wherever he was at that point, like the rest of them are just sort of like trimmed. But yeah, it's fascinating. I believe he also worked on Slayers, which never aired.
Yeah, they were.
Well, and I remember he posted about that.
They were preparing that one, but it never saw the light of day.
Crazy stuff, man. Like this has been a crazy flashback, and I not to pat my own back, but like remembering all this stuff from 10 years ago. When I haven't watched Cybersix in a while, but like the fact that I can remember all this stuff so vividly is just kind of like a testament to the effect of the show and how cool it is.
Absolutely.
How memorable it is.
Oh yeah. You did a fantastic job on the DVD.
Yeah.
Pat your back for you, I guess, because I was watching it right before this. Actually, I'm just like, oh man, this Brady, they know their stuff. Like it was just really, really cool to listen to and to watch, and Thank you for making it because it's one of my favorite parts of my collection. So.
Well, I'm glad you guys have enjoyed it. I'm glad people seem to have sort of enjoyed it, and it seems the fans sort of took what I kind of started there and have been adding to it.
Yeah.
Cybersix for me was just like I said, like it aired on Fox Kids here, and it was always interesting to me, and like it was like a flash in the pan. And then when I got the opportunity, like, oh, I know the pedigree of this. I know the animation's really good. I know the history of the show. There's interesting history, and so like I had the time to work on it. So like I was just like fascinated by it, and I just kept digging and finding all this stuff, and that's how I found the story of like Hervé Berdard and like all that stuff. So it was always fascinating, and like I'm glad like somebody else sort of shares my weird fascination with this little show. Like it's cool that there are fans out there, and I'm so glad that people are out there still talking about this little thing.
I mean, it's been a low-key obsession of mine for 20 years now, and I think that's been the case for a lot of people, and like I can see why it would compel people to dig in and have such a strong reaction overall. So we'll leave it there. Thanks you two for coming on. This has been really great. Z, can you just let everyone know where folks can find you online?
Oh, okay. You guys can find me at ZKArt pretty much everywhere on the internet. So I got a YouTube, I got a Twitter. Before that like blows up, this is probably going to be like
Twitter question mark.
I don't know. TikTok, I'm Z the Raccoon on there. I have a fursuit. I am a furry. Yeah. If you see a purple raccoon anywhere on the internet, that's probably me. Where else am I? Yeah, just ZKArt, Instagram, whatever. I exist.
And Brady, where can people find you? And what else are you working on right now? If there was anything else you didn't mention that you can talk about.
Let's see. So you can find me at Brady Hartel. That's my name, BradyHartel. On Twitter, I post about cartoons and random stuff and things I find funny that maybe other people don't find funny, but I think they're funny. I'm working on a show called Iria Zeram, the animation, remastered in HD for the first time on Blu-ray. It's about done. In fact, once I get off of this, I have to complete it tonight or else. I'm also working on a show called Reference Cutie Honey, which is a cool Hideki Anno directed 3-episode OVA based on Cutie Honey, but really cool animation.
Cutie Honey is maybe my favorite anime ever. I think it is. It is so good. My favorite OVA for sure.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting too because it's a very like sort of like sex pervert funny Cutie Honey, really, but it's like not in a way that Cybersix the comic is, right?
Yeah.
So it's like a lot of fun, and it's sort of cheesy. And funny. It's
another good example of a distilled adaptation. They kind of cut out all the stuff that doesn't really work from the comic and just hone in on what makes Cutie Honey great. And as the result is the best Cutie Honey by far. And it trended on Twitter in the US when you guys announced it too, which is
that one.
Yeah. Oh, really? I didn't. I know we trying some stuff, but that's cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It didn't trend in Canada though, further showing that we suck in this country. Maybe we don't deserve that Discotek distribution.
See, like I knew that was going to come up. I have no control over that, and I don't know how to fix it. Yeah.
I was just making a joke.
I do feel bad for you guys though, because it is very expensive to import.
Oh my god, the shipping sucks.
Yeah, it's very hard, and I don't know what the solution is for it. It's just really hard. Even if we were to have a distributor up there, it's like it's just so expensive. So I'm not sure what the solution is. I feel so bad for you guys though.
Okay,
you gotta buy with friends.
Yeah. Yes. For Cutie Honey though, we did an all new dub and we brought back Jessica as Cutie Honey and all that. So hopefully people enjoy that. And we have a lot of voice surprises in it too. So it's hopefully going to be really cool. But yeah, that's what I'm working on. Otherwise, I'm working on Skullgirls. We're working on the season 1 pass still. The character, like nobody probably cares about this, but like the character Black Dahlia is about to come out, and we're working on turning the boss character into a full character, Marie. And so I will either be working on anime or that for probably the next year. So yeah, you can find my adventures on Twitter, unless it blows up.
Yeah, thanks, Brady. Thanks for listening to the episode. You can find me on Twitter at jbetteridge or email zannencanada@gmail.com. The theme song is by Ultraclystron and can be found on his album Packet Flood, which you can find on ultraclystron.com. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast app of choice. See you again.
Band of brothers, shoulder to shoulder, none dare defy us, none were any bolder. Sound the horn in every astral plan to rally round our merry men. We stand with brother to the end, the joys of freedom to defend. Here's the place to be on the side of the free with rockets. Robin Hood.
You've entered the detour on Teletoon. Get ready for the maturely immature ride of your life.